The studio lights were hot, the cameras unforgiving, and Kash Patel leaned back in his chair with the smirk of a man who believed the stage already belonged to him. He cut in, waved his hand dismissively, and with a laugh dripping with condescension, tried to reduce Jasmine Crockett to a footnote in his performance. For a split second, it looked like the imbalance of power was set. Patel grinned wider, convinced he had won the room before the debate had even begun. But then came the silence. Crockett didn't rush. She didn't flinch. She let his arrogance hang in the air, heavy, waiting for its own weight to collapse. And when she finally spoke, her words cut with precision sharper than any interruption he could muster. Her comeback was not shouted, not desperate. It was delivered with the calm assurance of someone who had lived too much, fought too hard, to be rattled by smugness on live television. The effect was instant. Patel's grin faltered. The audience, stunned, gasped before breaking into an energy that pulsed across the room like electricity. On social media, the clip was already flying across timelines, the caption simple: "She ended him." In that moment, the power dynamic flipped. Crockett wasn't just responding, she was rewriting the entire conversation. But what led to this electrifying exchange is a story of arrogance, dignity, and one moment that would shake the room to its core. It began as a routine television panel, one of those primetime debates where the producers hoped for sparks but expected the same tired talking points. The cameras rolled, the chyron screamed breaking news, and seated at the center was Kash Patel, the show's self-styled heavyweight. He arrived with the swagger of someone who believed the spotlight was his birthright. From the moment he adjusted his tie and leaned forward into the microphone, Patel projected dominance. He interrupted hosts, steamrolled co-guests, and weaponized his smirk like it was part of his resume. To Patel, this was a performance, a chance to flex his authority, to silence critics by sheer force of personality. He had done it before, bulldozing conversations, making lesser-prepared guests stumble under the weight of his confidence. And when Jasmine Crockett's name was announced, Patel barely concealed his disdain. He laughed, leaned back, and muttered something under his breath. In his eyes, she wasn't a worthy opponent. She was an afterthought, a box checked by the producers to provide balance before he delivered the knockout lines he had rehearsed. What Patel didn't know was that Crockett wasn't there to play his game. She had walked into that studio armed with more than facts. She carried conviction, resilience, and a patience forged by years of being underestimated. Still, the opening minutes painted a clear picture. Patel dominating airtime, talking over questions, hurling snide remarks with the casual arrogance of a man certain he couldn't be touched. Viewers at home began to sigh, expecting yet another round where bluster trampled dignity. But Crockett's silence was strategic. Every smirk Patel offered only tightened the spring she was winding. The room thought they knew the script. The audience thought they knew how this segment would play out. Nobody watching could have predicted how fast the balance of power was about to flip. To understand why this moment mattered, you have to understand Kash Patel. He didn't rise to prominence by being subtle. He built his brand on sharp elbows and louder-than-life confidence, carving out a role in the political arena as the man willing to say the unsayable. To his supporters, he was a fighter. To everyone else, he was the embodiment of bluster, someone who thrived not on truth, but on intimidation. Patel cultivated an image that blended courtroom theatrics with partisan loyalty. He strutted into hearings like they were boxing matches, wielding words as punches, turning complexity into sound bites designed to dominate headlines. It wasn't enough to make an argument. He had to belittle, to sneer, to make sure his opponent left looking smaller than when they entered. He relished the optics, the smirk, the dismissive laugh, the rolling eyes. It was all part of the character he had perfected. And yet, beneath the bravado, there was a pattern. Whenever challenged by those he underestimated, immigrants, women, voices outside his narrow circle, Patel's mask would slip. His tone would sharpen, his gestures grow wilder, his words more biting. It was as if he couldn't comprehend dignity in others without trying to tear it down. Arrogance wasn't just a trait. It was his default defense mechanism. Controversy followed him like a shadow. His name surfaced in the most heated political battles, often aligned with efforts that critics called reckless, dismissive of norms, corrosive to truth. For Patel, though, controversy wasn't a liability. It was currency. The more headlines he sparked, the stronger he felt. The louder the criticism, the wider his grin. In his mind, outrage was proof of power. So when the producers booked him for this panel, Patel walked in expecting the same script he had played 100 times before. Overwhelm, interrupt, dominate. He saw Jasmine Crockett not as a peer, but as a prop, someone to decorate the stage while he delivered his performance. The arrogance was written on his face before the first question was even asked. And in that arrogance lay the seed of his undoing. Because across from Patel sat someone he hadn't studied, hadn't prepared for, and certainly hadn't respected. A woman who had built her life not on bluster but on resilience. A voice that didn't need to shout to command attention. But across from Patel sat someone with a story of resilience he could never have imagined. Jasmine Crockett's story does not begin under the bright lights of a television studio. It begins in the quiet resilience of a young woman determined to carve out a place where dignity and truth could not be silenced. Born into a community where opportunity was often rationed and barriers seemed deliberately stacked, she learned early that survival required more than ambition. It required grit. Her parents instilled values that would shape her life: faith in hard work, reverence for education, and pride in heritage. She excelled in school, not because doors were opened for her, but because she pushed them open herself. Every scholarship she earned, every classroom she commanded, was the product of long nights and the stubborn refusal to let circumstance dictate destiny. That fire carried her into law, where she became not just a practitioner of justice, but a defender of those the system too often forgot. Immigrants, working families, the marginalized. Crockett's clients were people who had been told no so many times that even their voices trembled when they said yes. Her work in public service became an extension of her identity. She wasn't chasing headlines. She was chasing fairness. In a landscape dominated by figures like Patel, who wielded arrogance as though it were wisdom, Crockett chose another weapon: preparation. Every case, every argument, every speech was sharpened not to impress but to uplift. And slowly people began to notice. She didn't scream for recognition. Recognition came to her because she stood tall when it was easier to bow. But Crockett's rise was not without scars. She knew what it felt like to be dismissed, to have her credentials questioned, to be interrupted before she could finish a thought. She knew the sting of being underestimated not because of her ability, but because of who she was and where she came from. And each time she absorbed the insult, added it to the ledger, and let it fuel her. So when she stepped into that studio across from Kash Patel, she wasn't just another guest. She carried with her every courtroom victory, every community member who had leaned on her strength, every sleepless night spent proving she belonged. She wasn't there to play the part he expected. She was there to embody something Patel could never counterfeit: authenticity. That's why her calm silence in those opening moments mattered. Patel thought he was bulldozing just another opponent. But Crockett was not an opponent. She was the culmination of resilience forged in struggle and sharpened through service. So when Patel smirked and took his first shot, he had no idea what storm was coming his way. The debate opened with a rhythm Patel knew well. He spoke first, he spoke longest, and he spoke loudest. His sentences weren't crafted to illuminate but to dominate, filling the air with noise so thick it left little room for anyone else to breathe. When the host tried to pivot to Jasmine Crockett, Patel cut in before she could finish a single sentence, his hand slicing through the air as if her words were nothing more than static. Crockett, however, did not flinch. She held her posture, her eyes steady, her lips pressed into the kind of measured smile that spoke louder than interruptions ever could. But each time she opened her mouth, Patel swooped in, snide chuckles, exaggerated sighs, rolling eyes aimed squarely at diminishing her presence. The audience could feel the imbalance. Patel's performance was not just disrespect. It was a calculated attempt to rattle her, to force her into the same shouting match where he had buried countless others. For a moment, it seemed to work. He dominated the camera time, commandeered the conversation, and wrapped himself in the illusion of control. Viewers at home groaned. They had seen this pattern before: bluster drowning out dignity, volume smothering truth. And yet Crockett's silence was not weakness. It was patience. She let Patel perform, let him circle the stage, let him sharpen his own arrogance into a blade so dull it would soon break in his hands. Every smirk he threw was another thread unraveling in his own performance. Every time he interrupted, the tension in the room only grew, like a spring tightening, ready to snap. Those who underestimated Crockett mistook her calm for surrender. What they didn't realize was that she was studying him, measuring his cadence, his arrogance, the gaps in his certainty. She wasn't reacting to him, she was preparing to end him. The room buzzed with Patel's voice, smug and unrelenting. And then, in one carefully measured pause, Crockett struck. Patel leaned back, a grin spreading across his face as though the segment was already over. His words dripped with disdain, his tone laced with the confidence of someone who believed interruption equaled victory. The audience shifted uncomfortably, some rolling their eyes, others resigned to yet another spectacle of arrogance. Patel chuckled, tilting his head, daring Crockett to try to match his bluster. But Jasmine Crockett didn't take the bait. She fixed her gaze on him, steady and unshaken, her calmness cutting through the noise like a blade through fog. For a moment, the entire studio seemed to still. Patel kept smirking, but there was a flicker, just a flicker of unease in his eyes as her silence stretched, deliberate and powerful. And then she spoke. Her voice was low, measured, but carried the kind of weight that can only come from absolute conviction. She didn't match Patel's volume, she dismantled it. With surgical precision, she unraveled his argument, point by point, revealing contradictions he had hoped no one would notice. Every sentence she delivered landed with the force of a gavel. She didn't need theatrics. Her clarity was its own thunder. Patel tried to interrupt, but this time, it didn't work. Crockett pressed forward, her eyes locked on him, her words rolling out like a tide impossible to stop. "You can talk over me all you want," she said, her tone steady. "But the truth doesn't get drowned out just because you're louder. And if arrogance were evidence, you'd have won your case already." The room erupted. Gasps first, then a wave of applause that broke the tension like glass shattering. Patel blinked, his grin faltering, the veneer of control cracking under the weight of her precision strike. For the first time that evening, it wasn't Crockett fighting to be heard. It was Patel struggling to recover. Crockett didn't stop there. She paused just long enough for the audience to feel the silence, then delivered the line that would be replayed in clip after clip across social media. "You mistake bullying for brilliance, Kash, but let me remind you, dignity doesn't need to shout." It was the kind of comeback that doesn't just silence an opponent, it redefines the entire moment. Patel's bravado collapsed into a nervous laugh, his eyes darting toward the host for rescue. None came. The studio was firmly on Crockett's side now, the air alive with the electricity of witnessing arrogance toppled in real time. The crowd reaction swelled, part disbelief, part exhilaration. Viewers at home grabbed their phones, rushing to clip the moment, to send it to friends, to tweet with captions like, "This is how you handle a bully." In that instant, Crockett wasn't just a guest on a panel. She was a symbol, proof that composure and truth could still triumph in an arena designed for chaos. Patel sat frozen, his rehearsed confidence drained away. His smirk, once a weapon, now looked more like a shield cracking under the pressure. Crockett, by contrast, looked untouched. She hadn't raised her voice, hadn't broken her composure. She had simply spoken with the authority of someone who knew her worth, and forced the world to see it too. And in that single exchange, the balance of power shifted entirely. Patel, the The self-anointed heavyweight was suddenly small. Crockett, the underestimated guest, was undeniable. But the shockwaves didn't stop in that studio. The moment Crockett's words left her lips, the studio buzz turned into a roar. But the true explosion happened outside those walls. Within minutes, the clip hit Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, each platform transforming her comeback into a rallying cry. The caption was simple, sharp, and everywhere. She ended him. Hashtags surged into trending territory. Crockett Clapback, mic drop moment, dignity wins. Comment sections overflowed, not just with applause but with relief. Viewers who had grown weary of watching arrogance dominate the stage now had a highlight reel of justice they could replay again and again. Memes arrived almost instantly. Patel's frozen expression was looped, slowed down, paired with captions like, "When you realize the loudest one isn't the smartest one." Crockett's calm gaze became reaction images, stickers, TikTok sounds. For every second Patel had spent smirking in that studio, 1,000 posts now turned that smugness into a punchline. Then came the commentary. Journalists clipped the exchange for primetime recaps. Influencers dissected the comeback frame by frame, explaining why it resonated so deeply. Political analysts praised Crockett's composure, contrasting it with Patel's unraveling facade. And the chorus grew louder when celebrities added their voices, retweeting the clip, adding fire emojis, calling it the takedown of the year. Even late-night comedians joined in. By the next evening, Patel's performance was less a show of strength and more a cautionary tale, played on loop for laughs. What had begun as his stage to dominate had been hijacked and rewritten into a public spectacle of his defeat. For Crockett, though, the impact was far greater than a viral moment. Her name began trending alongside words like strength, truth, and representation. Audiences who had never seen her before were suddenly fans, calling her the voice we need and proof that dignity can still win. Communities she represented felt validated, seen and proud to watch someone who carried their struggles stand her ground with grace. The collective energy was undeniable. This wasn't just about one panel or one debate. It was about the hunger people felt for authenticity in a landscape drowning in arrogance. Crockett had become a vessel for that hunger. Her mic drop not just a comeback, but a release. Yet beyond the laughs and memes, something deeper was happening. A cultural message being carved in stone. In the days that followed, as the laughter subsided and the memes found their place in internet history, what lingered wasn't just the spectacle of a comeback. It was the meaning behind it. Jasmine Crockett had done more than silence a smug opponent. She had reframed the contest entirely, proving that in the face of arrogance, dignity carries its own unstoppable force. Patel's strategy had been the oldest trick in the book. Talk louder, sneer harder, overwhelm the space with bluster, until truth had no room to breathe. But Crockett revealed something far more powerful. That truth doesn't need volume to resonate. It needs conviction. And when delivered with calm clarity, it can cut through the thickest walls of noise. Her moment on that stage became less about her and Patel, and more about what their exchange symbolized. For every immigrant family told they didn't belong, for every young woman dismissed in a meeting, for every voice cut off before it could speak, Crockett's composure offered vindication. She didn't just win an argument. She embodied the principle that respect and authenticity will outlast arrogance every time. It's why her words resonated so deeply across communities. They weren't simply a defense, they were a declaration. A reminder that service is greater than self-interest, that humility is stronger than hubris, and that the American ideal is not found in shouting others down, but in standing tall for what is right. The moral was clear. Arrogance may command attention, but dignity earns respect. Bluster may trend for a moment, but truth endures. And when those two forces collide, the quiet power of integrity will always have the last word. That's why Crockett's comeback was never just entertainment. It was a snapshot of what courage looks like when arrogance tests its limits. It was a moment where millions watching could see themselves reflected, not in Patel's smirk, but in Crockett's strength. And that's why this moment isn't just a viral clip. It's a blueprint for courage in the face of arrogance. The audience froze. Patel's grin faltered. Twitter erupted. And in that sequence of moments, Jasmine Crockett proved something timeless. That a single voice grounded in dignity can silence the loudest arrogance. What began as just another television panel ended as a cultural turning point. A reminder that composure is not weakness, it is power. This wasn't simply a debate or a comeback crafted for applause. It was a declaration that truth, when spoken with conviction, can dismantle even the most practiced bluster. Crockett gave us more than a viral moment. She gave us a mirror, reflecting the strength that so many of us carry but are too often told to hide. And now, it's on us to carry that energy forward. If this moment made you feel proud, if it reminded you that dignity still has a place in our public life, then join this community. Subscribe, share this video, and let's make sure stories like this reach every corner of the country. Because arrogance may shout, but together voices like ours will always be louder in the ways that matter most. The clip may end here, but the movement is only beginning.